I want to talk to you briefly about teaching the alphabet to young children. And I think what I have to say will be relevant if you are working with children who are already at the beginning reading stages but who are struggling with alphabet knowledge. I think the most important thing to remember about teaching the alphabet is that before we teach the alphabet, we really want children to understand the alphabetic principle. Now, this is particularly key for children who are just starting out and really eager to learn the alphabet, but it also is very applicable to students who are beginning readers but they're struggling, and in most cases, a struggling beginning reader does not have a firm grasp on the alphabet. So let's talk briefly about the alphabetic principle, and perhaps the best way to understand it is this particular slide. If a child can isolate the beginning sound of bear, and that task is called beginning sound isolation, which is a phonemic awareness skill. If a child can look at bear and say B, then they can look at that black squiggly abstract symbol and understand and identify that that letter says B. One of the ways that we teach young children to isolate beginning sounds is by playing a game like this called Beginning Sound Bingo, where each child in a small group would have a bingo card, and the teacher obviously can see the images on everyone's card, and she simply calls out to the children something like this: who has ball? And the child who has the picture of ball on her card will put a game piece on that picture and then be encouraged and then eventually required to actually repeat ball. So this is primarily a game that we use to model beginning sound isolation so that the child's brain starts to wrap around the concept of isolating the beginning sound of a spoken word. The advantage of playing this kind of a game is that the child hears the teacher isolate the beginning sound. The child is asked to repeat that beginning sound, and also the children who are nearby hear the isolation of the sound as well. So it's a multiplication effect, but this game is primarily a modeling technique. Once a child can isolate beginning sounds, then we encourage the child to play other games with those same bingo cards in which they are independently isolating the beginning sound of the key picture at the top and finding the other images on the card that have that same beginning sound. This is another activity that a child can work with independently in order to really become excellent at isolating the beginning sounds of spoken words. And just a quick reminder, we are doing this beginning sound isolation work because it allows the child to understand the alphabetic principle. If the child can look at bear and say B, then that child can identify that symbol next to the bear and the sound that it makes. The child's ability to isolate beginning sounds from spoken words allows me to introduce them to the alphabet. So in this particular activity, I have a set of cards that I've divided up into small clusters, and I can ask the child, what's the beginning sound of apple? And the child can tell me A. And then I can point out to that child that that symbol next to the apple says A. What's the beginning sound of goat? I will ask. G, says the child. That letter says G. The next, I will simply ask the child, think about the beginning sound of house, and then tell me what you think that letter says. So because the child has the ability to isolate beginning sounds, they can start to apply the alphabetic principle to tell me what these symbols say. And so we can proceed to do some alphabet work where the child starts to apply the alphabetic principle to figure out the sounds that letters make, and in doing so gets the repetition that they need in order to remember and to learn these alphabet letters. In this activity, I will take a turn first and choose a card. Maybe I'll choose the card mouse. The beginning sound of mouse is M. Let's see if I can find where the letter M is. So this is called sound and letter sorting, this particular activity. But essentially, it's a mapping of sounds to symbols. because we go from the image, we slice off the beginning sound, and then we find the letter that matches that sound. I will continue taking turns until I feel confident that the child can be independent with this work. And if it's a young 4 or 5-year-old child, it might take a few days before they're comfortable with this, even though they have the prerequisite skill of beginning sound isolation to actually do the activity. This slide shows a more challenging way to do this activity because there is not a key picture at the top to guide the child to the proper answer. This is very similar in the sense that the image is giving the child the information that he needs in order to find the proper letter. So he's not expected to really read all 3 letters to figure out which is the right letter. He starts with the picture, with the image. The picture of girl is basically telling the child, where is the G? The picture of the seal is essentially asking the child, where is the letter S? And so forth. Now, as with the other games and activities, I will always take a turn first, allow the child to have a turn, and sometimes we go back and forth. But I need to feel confident that the child can work with this activity independently and that the child's not confused and the child is essentially doing the activity correctly. Once the child is independent with this activity and with other alphabet activities, the role of the teacher is just simply to supervise practice and not to engage necessarily with the child unless the child is really struggling. So these are just a few thoughts that I had about teaching the alphabet. I'm happy to get any feedback that you have for me, any comments or questions you might have. Thanks so much for joining me today.